So, you know, it's funny, that's all, say that to say. I seen it last week, so I was like,
you got your camera on camera?
Still uptown. Are you from Los Angeles? Yeah, he's younger. My parents used to have a video store in the 80s. I can't remember. That's my mom wearing a store sweater. It's called Just Tapes. That's my first introduction to design was that for the store. I was little, like, the store closed in 87, so I was like, born in 81, so I was 6. Yeah, it's crazy.
Nah, you like, I'm glad that you got it, but
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'll stand in the middle. Hello. Good evening.
Hey.
Thank you all for coming on the occasion of this, admittedly, our 11th exhibition at 52 Walker, but only our 3rd event. it's exciting because we've always looked for ways to activate the space more and bring people in. And this show especially felt like a great opportunity to do that. This is Arthur Jafa's show at 52 Walker, Black Tool, and Die Trynig. And it's open until June 1st. Oh, sorry, I missed the power. That says something. Black Power, Tool, and Die Trynig. And I'm appreciative of all of you here to witness this conversation between AJ and our lovely guest, Simone White. Simone is a writer and poet, and AJ and Simone have recently had a very generative conversation on the occasion of both of AJ's shows, one here at 52 Walker and another exhibition at Barbara Gladstone, and it just felt like such a natural back and forth that we were excited to bring people in for a live version. We're going to listen to our guests, and I will open it up for questions at the end of the exhibition. I'll be walking around with this mic, so when it's time, please do put your hand up if you would like to ask a question, and take it away. Thank you, everyone. So, are you adjusted? So what's up? I think those mics have to be very close, actually.
Really?
To us. Okay.
Hello, hello. Oh,
Like that.
wow.
Okay.
Okay.
How are you feeling?
I feel good.
Okay.
You know,
This is
traveling
exciting.
a lot. Is it?
I'm excited. I'm excited. I have many questions.
Okay. Well, let me just start first by saying Simone has become
I'm waiting for the word.
my go-to conversationalist. I like to talk to Simone. She just called me up. We talk about trap music.
Yes.
She asked me about trap music. Asked me about trap music, and I was like, huh. And then I picked up her books. So she's, as Ebony said, a writer and a poet, but also, I think, one of the smartest people out there. So.
That's a hard comment. Now I'm embarrassed. I got stuff to ask. I got jokes. I think, so, one of the things that we're sort of always left with, and it may be, can you hear me? It may be that everybody has heard you say this, that the idea of your sort of closure is to, let me see if I can remember it, is to make Black cinema with the power and, or like majesty of Black music, right? Well, I guess over the course of the last couple of weeks, as I've been able to look at this new work, both here and uptown at Gladstone, I was thinking about the fact that that might be like a false dichotomy, because one of the things that I was thinking about was the extent to which the moving image is sort of in this kind of like holy union with sound in the works. And so I was kind of hoping that you would talk a little bit about how sound is a material for you. We often hear about the image as material, but it doesn't seem to me that they're separable in any of the ways. So maybe, especially the sound design for this work, and then LOML, which is what I like, particularly that.
Well, the sort of mantra that you were referring to, it says, trying to make cinema with the power of beauty and alienation. And really that's just, just a shorthand for trying to speak to the kind of complicated nature of Black music, like how it exists for us, meaning for Black folks, but how it exists for, people at large. Like I always like to say, it's not only Black people who are into Black music. I'm saying something that's kind of obvious, but I've thought about that for years and years and years. How come, given the sort of, this is an abject nature of black people exist in this white supremacist environment, it seems like the sort of almost irony of the music being so loved. So I've just been fascinated by that, and I'd often ask myself, because like in a way, the kind of horse I rode in, is the black aesthetic horse. That's my thing. I'm like very interested in black aesthetics, like, and even when I mention music or I sort of position music as a sort of bar, so to speak, of what like black expressivity can look like, just by the example of music. It's really aesthetics I'm really sort of preoccupied with. Music is great because everybody's familiar with it. So in some ways, it's very easy to discuss like the conceptual realm of it when you talk about music. Because I found like black people in particular have kind of heard everything, in a strange kind of way. It's like, I can mention so many things, and then most people will be familiar with them. It's like you're very versatile and very literate when it comes to our musical output. So it's very easy sort of to, if you're trying to describe things by analogy, because so much of it for me always is about, as I use that term, conditions of possibility, and how, what does exist and what doesn't exist, and why, the whys and wherewithals of that. I'm very fascinated by that. Like I'm fascinated by the music functioning on such a high level, let's say, in such a complicated way, but at the same time, how you can see in these other spaces, like the visual space in particular, it seems relatively speaking, as Cornel West put it back in the early 80s, underdeveloped, or as he said, not very apparent, I think is what he said in this interview. I've talked about it before, but he said that it was the first time I'd ever read an interview with Cornell. It was in Social Text, I think. And it was, Cornell was an incredible mind, so it was really amazing to read like this encyclopedic breadth of his understanding of black culture. And I think it was Anders Stevens or something asked him, and at some point he just sort of said, like, well, what about, because he was talking about everything, basically. He was talking about music, basketball, like everything. He said, well, what about visual? And he said, I don't think it's that apparent. And I remember at the time, it's, this is pre-social media, so it set off a kind of shitstorm in a sense. Like, people were really pissed, like in the visual arts community. I remember in particular, like, Howardine Pendell was on a warpath. And basically, she was just like, Cornell speaking out of ignorance. He's just basically giving ammunition for, those forces that want to keep people black folks out of this particular realm of expression. It's very clear from now, you can see, it's not like black people with visual capacity were just born in the last 30 years or something like that. You know what I mean? It's not like a new thing. People were always there. I asked, when I first started working with Gap, and I asked him, like, very straightforward, how come you never had a black artist? It's like a very basic question to me. And I asked Barbara the same thing. These are people that I respect. I don't consider them to be, I consider them very principled people, but it was a very interesting question to ask, because I'm not like, it's not a guilt thing, anything like that. I'm just trying to understand, like, the phenomenon. And they just, both have said a version of it, we just didn't see them. Which is complicated, And I'm taking them, that seemed like an honest answer to me. So it's really complicated, this whole idea, I'm not saying anything so new or deep now, invisibility. It's complicated, how willful kind of the way it is. So I was very interested, have always been very interested in all kinds of expressivity, how black people might utilize different mediums, different forms, things like that, to express our sort of existential experiences, states, these kinds of things. And the visual thing is so interesting because if like myself, if you're a person who believes in black aesthetics, African retention, I can remember my freshman year at Howard, just in the stacks at Howard's library, just cruising the stacks. I didn't know what I was looking for, and I just put my hand up and I pulled out Leroy Jones's book of essays called Home. So this is pre-Baroque, was called Home, and I'm just reading it, and I came across this term, African retention, and that's one of those head exploding moments for me. I was like, African retention, what the fuck does that mean, you know?
What you mean believe? Like, that's such an interesting
What do you mean?
way of believe in retention, because it seems like, so the idea, thank you, just if the idea is that there is something like that could be communicated through time, right, through, for example, knowledge of black music, right, and this constitutes something like an African reality. But for me, it is a question of belief and faith, right, because I'm not sure that I believe in that. Can you tell me what you mean that it was a head exploding moment?
I mean, like conceptually, you know, like for me, I mean, I grew up in a house, and my parents were teachers and things like that. It would be considered a very liberal, if not progressive house. You know, my parents were both involved, you know, civil rights stuff. My father was the head of this, like, student union the year that they, at Alcorn University in Mississippi, and they closed the school down because they were trying to get the college to divest from certain things, and they just canceled all the classes, you know. My dad ended up in the military after that. But, so I came from a house where it was like, you know, I just remember things like, some of them were overtly political things, but some of them were things like, this is going to sound really crazy. Like in '67, we moved from Tupelo, Mississippi to Clarksville, Mississippi. Mm-hmm. Tupelo was sort of the model, post-segregated southern town in a way. Not because there was no racism or anything like that, just because they made certain calculations, and I could go more in depth about why they made those calculations, because it's something I've stumbled on understanding over the years. But they were like, this is going to happen. We can either get with it or get against it, but it's going to happen. So they made those calculations versus Clarksdale, which is the classic segregated kind of environment and stuff. So my parents took jobs at this small black college, Oklahoma College down in Clarksdale, and we moved there in '67. And it was a radical disjuncture from Tupelo to Clarksdale. But one of the things that I always kind of remember about it and remember about Clarksdale is this sense that, you know, you couldn't quite put your finger on, like, what you were inside of, like, so to speak. Like, I didn't really have the language in a sense to talk about it at the time, but I was like I felt very alienated in the environment. And I remember my parents we bought a trailer. It's so funny now because trailers are, you know, the sign of abjection and poverty and stuff like that. But in 1967, a trailer was like a spaceship, basically. I remember distinctly my parents going to the place, buying the trailer, and it was like living in a space capsule or something, you know. And we get down to Clarksdale, we have this trailer and everything, and I remember it came, because it was a prefab home, basically, is what it was. So it had like a painting glued to the wall. You know, it just came with it, like as part of the decor. And it was a Spanish woman. She was flamenco, not a dancer, like a performer. She had this guitar in her hand. And I remember my dad prying it off the wall and repainting her black. You know, and I don't remember him saying anything about it. He just kind of did. It was that moment. But I also remember a pressure cooker full of collard greens exploding in that same space, and there being collard greens all over everything. For 2 or 3 years, I would be on the floor and be picking collard greens up. And like years later, I thought that was a Jackson Pollock. You know what I mean? So there was always this way that I felt like, you know, what I was trying to get at earlier is like, in the context of Africa, if we say African or black aesthetics rolled out of Africa, or as Baraka said, it didn't arise on the plantations, it arrived at the plantations, okay? So if that's true, then it's really striking that in the context of Africa, one of the few things that is as deep and as broad and as diverse as musical expression is plastic or material expressivity, meaning sculptures and things like that. And in fact, and I've said this 1,000 times, in fact, there's no contemporary art practice as it currently exists that would exist without the impact that first African art had on Western art practice, at the turn of, for going from the 19th into the 20th century. And then secondly, when black music, African music, took hold domestically in the Americas, jazz, blues, gospel, all these kinds of things, and the impact that had on contemporary art practice. So you just can't get around it. It doesn't matter if it's John Cage, it doesn't matter if it's Duchamp, it doesn't matter if it's Picasso, it doesn't matter if it's Paul. Almost in every instance, you can go straight to something that's specifically a black aesthetic preoccupation in modern. So.
That's helpful. I want to sort of stay on this question of spiritual communication or something like that. And I guess...
Well, what do you mean by spiritual communication?
Well, I guess the idea, obviously, like the substance of blackness as we think about it is not a material or even a conscious thing. It is an inchoate matter which circulates through, as you said, like maybe it's the nature of songs, right? And at this point, even when we talk about like the arrival of black music as like a practice in the Americas or something like that, it's like it's 2024. I'm the generation after the generation of the civil rights generation, and the communications have to be actually what we have around us now, right? And so that's what I mean, spiritual communication, or like that being the substance of blackness, or the ways in which black people communicate being what is left to us of the retention.
Right.
Yeah. And so, like this black man, but love of my life, that was kind of what I was thinking about. I was thinking about love. And so death is the one hand, and then on the other hand, we have this question of love and communion. And I was thinking about Greg Tate. And there's a photograph, like somewhere along the way in the last couple of weeks, I saw a photograph of you and Greg Tate back in the day, maybe 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. And would you like to say something about
Greg?
About Greg? Yeah.
About the piece or about Greg?
Your choice.
Well, some of it, I don't know how much is per se about Greg. Maybe is Greg's effect on me in my life, which is not obviously about Greg per se. I've said like 100 times at this point that like when he passed, it was like I realized like this is a person I've been in essentially a Vulcan mind meld for 40 years. And I think particularly the first 6 months, it was like I had a stroke or something. It was very difficult for me to think because my thinking was so intertwined with the sort of call and response, and even now, anything that I do that feels like an accomplishment of some sort, big or little, like this show, there's always this thing where I forget that he's just not here and I can't just call him and say, yo, are you coming? What do you think? Or something. I still haven't, I don't know if I'm ever gonna, the absence is gonna be a permanent part of my being in a way. He was, as people who know him, like all of us, nobody's perfect, but as an agent, as a champion of black people and black artistry and black aesthetics, he was, he was a god. Like, he was amazing. It was incredible to run around in his wake as his friend. I mean, like in some ways, I felt like I was in his slipstream a lot of times. Like he's always sees me said I was like Forrest Gump. Like I just had a knack for finding myself in situations that were interesting, you know what I mean? So maybe when I met him, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good vehicle to see some interesting shit, so I'm just going to run with this dude. But, he was, I think I'm pretty smart, but if you have a best friend like Greg, it just naturally levels any kind of lack of humility you might have, because he was, as I always say, had the big brain. He would, even tricks and stuff. Like, he was the only person I knew personally who, it was like a party trick. You could ask him, like, somebody's phone number, like, just anywhere, anytime. And he just, that seems like such a simple demonstration of his genius, because I think most people knew he was a genius, but he was just, he was a classic Libra. He was very even keeled. He was just a champion. It's like I never, some critics, if you want to say he was a critic, I never saw him. He didn't really write about things that he didn't love. Even if he was critical of them in some way or another, it was always like, I remember he wrote about Michael Jackson and he talked about Michael's things, around his surgeries and plastic surgery and all this kind of stuff. But it was only because he knew how important Michael was, like the complexity of who Michael was to black people, which is kind of like just another example of these ongoing complex discourses that still really only exist and I say in the community, I don't mean in the physical community, but there are things that exist in our heads. And again, especially pre-social media and Twitter and things like this. I remember, for example, around maybe 71, 72, and it's not again, you didn't turn on the news. Nobody said this on the news. I guess if we had our own country, you would turn on the news and somebody would say, the nation is upset and disturbed. Is Michael Jackson's voice going to break? Is his voice going to break? But I can remember everybody being very preoccupied with this idea. Is Michael's voice going to crack? Because he was going through puberty. Is his voice going to crack? Now, in the meantime, the things that I have heard over years, just around that specific thing, whether they're true or not. Okay, let's just say, for example, I've never said this in public, but I'll say it in public now. Because it's just bizarre speculation and conjecture, right? I heard that, and this is bizarre, I'm just going to preface it, bizarre speculation and conjecture, that Joe Jackson had given Michael Jackson birth control pills when he was 10, 11 years old to level his voice changing. In other words, birth control pills at the time had 10 times more estrogen than what they have now as they stabilize birth control pills. And so in a way, on a mythic level, if you say, if that's true, what are the implications of that? Well, one of the implications of that is that it speaks to something very unique about Michael Jackson's voice. He didn't have a falsetto, like Prince had a falsetto. He didn't have a falsetto. He had this voice that had this very, very unique pitch, very high, but not a falsetto. And in a way, I have suggested that if it is true, this birth control thing, it means that he was a sort of chemical castrati. If you know anything about castratis, these were boys and they castrated them so their voices wouldn't change. And they had a very particular sound that they could produce because they had the pitch of women's pitch, alto, a high pitch. But as they grew older and they had men's lungs, they had more lung power than women had, but they had the pitch that was higher than men typically had. So there's Farinelli and people like that. There was a whole repertoire of music that was written just for castrati. Nobody else could perform it. Women didn't have the lung power, men couldn't hit the pitch. Only castrati could sing this music. So to me, on a mythic level, if you want to say it, it speaks to so much about Michael that's complicated, his androgyny, his skin problems, on so many levels, it's so deep. And Michael, for me, I said to Gavin once, not that long ago, I was like, I'm always going to be a failure in my mind, because even if I live another 40, 50 years, I would have to live 40, 50 years succeeding to counter the previous 40 years of not succeeding, as an identity. So to me, the people who were succeeding was Michael Jackson and then later Prince. Those were examples of a person who was doing it.
But that's an impossible hierarchy to put yourself in, isn't it? Isn't that impossible?
No, we have trouble hearing Simone.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Hello.
Got it.
Yeah, projecting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why would that be a measure of success?
Because it's a slave ship. Because we're on a slave ship, and there's only on the slave ship and off the slave ship. Michael Jackson was one of the few people I knew, figuratively speaking, who was off of the slave ship. Mm-hmm. I mean, this dude had a Saturday morning cartoon in the early 70s. I'm just saying, he was such a, I'll say this word in this context, he was a nigga from the future. Come on, let's be for real. He was totally from the future. You know, and even when people say things about him like, you know, I've spoken in the past about this sort of discrepancy between the voice he used in private and the voice he used in public.
Have you heard the private voice?
I have. I've heard it. I heard a recording of it. I never heard him speaking to me. I've heard him talking. But it's like in Lisa Marie's book, it's there. I know so many people who said, like, how shocked they were. You know, as one friend just said, you just sound like a nigga from Gary, Indiana. So the thing is like, but he's a shapeshifter. See, that's the thing to me about it as a strategy. Like, as a strategy, as a statistician, he was so incredibly brilliant. Like, for example, talking like a little boy has a certain effect. It makes people underestimate you, for one thing. I don't think Paul McCartney would have ever told him that the Beatles catalog was for sale. Like, he would have told Teddy Pendergrass, for example, you know? But he told Michael, and then Michael was like, it's for sale, I'm gonna buy it. And he bought it. You know, so it's like, in a way, he was like operating outside of the bounds and this, in some ways, self-imposed constraints that, you know, as black people we just have. I mean, his sense of entitlement, I think, was good or bad. It was phenomenal.
But doesn't it come from the sense that one is either on or off the slave ship? Like, if you are the only one who's off the slave ship, why wouldn't you have a sense of entitlement?
I'm just saying as a black person. I'm saying as a black person, you know. Or somebody said to me once, like, you know, it's just crabs in the barrel. But you always have to add that part in, as if the barrel is the natural habitat of the crabs, because it's not.
Yes.
It's the habitat that creates so much of the sort of maladies and effects of how we operate, you know. So,
so
it's not so much comparing myself
yeah.
or thinking you could reach the heights of that. I'm just saying, as a person who felt like they were in the slave ship, you can see people, you know, on the boardwalk just walking. You know, it's not a big thing. They're just cruising, going on with their lives. And it's like, and even in those moments where I felt like I'm not on the ship myself or I'm not in the barrel myself, I always feel like there's this incredible, I don't know if it's an ethical moment or if it's like a philosophical moment. If you're walking, it's a sunny day, you look over and there's a bunch of people in the slave ship, what do you do in that moment? You know, do you stop and go and try to emancipate them? Do you put the slave ship on fire? You know, what do you do? And I think it's a complicated phenomenon that happens all the time. Like, not always on the, I just gave you the most hyperbolic, extreme version of it. I can remember back in 97 or so, when I first entertained the idea of, you know, trying to be in the art world or something, going to David Jordan's space. He had a space in Soho, and there was this painter who I knew because my friend Carrie had introduced me to him, and he was walking slowly, looking at these Luke Torn paintings, and I remember, and I was just about to have my first show. Kiki Smith had invited me to be in this 3-person artist select show at Artist Space, and I was looking at him, this brother with dreads, who's from Philly, a very talented painter, and I thought at the time, he doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of succeeding in this context because so much of it just has nothing to do with talent or discipline or anything.
It's on Joe.
I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of Joes, but this brother's name wasn't Joe. But you know what I mean? And like, in a way, I was wrong in the sense, like, if he has hung on for 20 years after that point, maybe he does have a chance. But at the time, because you just knew it had nothing to do with talent. It's just like, on some sort of quantum level, it's like, nobody chooses to be on a slave ship or on a plantation. You just find yourself there.
Yeah, that's right. It's like a blip.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask you, oh my gosh.
Sorry, we just have notes that we can't.
That's okay. Sorry.
You gotta speak up, sis.
It's impossible. It's physically impossible. Can you tell me about the self-portraits? Because this is actually...
Self-portraits.
Yes, because it felt to me Like it was, because I was thinking about the self-portraits as, you know.
I think you got to point it towards you.
You still can hear?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So the Raven picture, the Raven is the death metal mask.
Oh, no.
The Raven photo, you know what I'm talking about? It's juxtaposed, I think, with...
Oh, the moms and the black metal?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So, I was like, oh, the self-portraiture, that I had just assumed that there was like an immediate correlate. I was like, oh, you know, like AJ's into death metal. Like as if there was a transparent, you know, route to your psyche or something, right? And then I realized that was a ridiculous assumption, and I should ask you, you know, like,
if I'm interested in death
well,
metal?
not really. I mean, I'm curious to know if you're interested in death metal. But mostly I'm curious about how the self-portraiture fits into this space and how it is that, because at this point I'm sort of like, oh, these things occupy some kind of mythic location in your brain, right? In the same way.
Yeah, totally.
So, you know, but what about the self-portraits? Like, how do they fit in?
Well, in the overall context of, I guess, what you're speaking to, let's use a term that is used a lot now, the ensemble, the group, the gang, whatever you want to call it. Like, you know, I'm another person who's in the group, in the gang, and so I dip in and out. You know, it's a little, you know, it's a little arrogant to put yourself in the context of like Adrian Piper, Miles Davis, but I like to think, like somebody said, that, you know, there are specialists and then there's uncommon folks. Everybody is kind of an uncommon folk, you know, in their lives, in the context. But we know they're specialists. There are people who are artists. You know, there's an occult dimension to what they do. I like to think of it as an occult dimension. You know, they maybe not warriors or maybe not civil rights activists, but they create change through quantum or alchemical processes, you know. It's not always just the person who was on the front line marching and stuff. Oftentimes, like, I'm not sure that black music hasn't had more to do with transforming black people's status in the world as we understand it than any political gesture whatsoever. Like, it's probably not even close. Like, in terms of just transforming people's minds and ideas about who black people are.
For sure.
And also just in terms of transforming what it means to be a living, thinking, feeling human being in social space. I mean, you can look at even the documentaries, like just how white people were moving and stuff in those documentaries. And then you see, you know what I mean? Just like, I'm just saying, you see these documentaries, you just get this sense that a lot of people were stiff. They were very stiff. And like rock and roll and R&B and stuff like that just showed people what moving fluidly looked like. It gave people license to move fluidly. It gave people a bar, like, oh, it's possible to move fluidly as this. Maybe people didn't even know they were dancing so stiffly. Like white people now can dance, can kind of dance a little bit. But when I grew up, man, if you were at a mixed party and were dancing, I danced with my eyes closed. Because if I saw white people dance, it would throw me off my rhythm. Man, we used to laugh about it. We used to say, it'd be one thing if they just weren't on the rhythm, but they had this uncanny ability to dodge the rhythm. It was crazy. Like they would never, and I'd be like, I'm not an essentialist or anything, so I was like, how do you account for that? What the fuck is that about? I mean, even now I'm on Instagram and I see folks being dance teachers and stuff, and I'm looking at it thinking they're pitiful. They really are not very good. You know, and I think about this all the time, like how can you talk about this? Or maybe it's not something, because it's impolite to talk about it. It's, you know what I mean? Because it plays into certain stereotypes. So we know, look, there's dancers, white folks, I'm not a good dancer at all, who can dance better than the majority of black folks. But on a meme, I'm saying, it's
so
there's something going on. I'm really curious about that. I mean,
there's a beautiful image of Donna Summer dancing in this video.
Right. But I didn't say anything about the self, like to me, the images, the self-portraits, Like the ones that, like there's one here. Like those are all, like that one and the other one that most people know, which is the monster portrait, where I'm looking at it. I would say those are like Batman pictures of me. You know, those are pictures of me, almost like Sidney Sherman, pretending to be, you know, a Miles Davis, dark. I'm dark, brooding, kind of. But anybody who knows me knows it's not real. I mean, it's not real, but
Who's
it's
that
real. Huh? Who's who?
Who is he?
Right here?
Yeah.
That's actually a she.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a character named Dawn.
Dawn.
That's part of my superhero series. LaRage was the first. There's a black superhero team called the M9, or Bella 9. The M9, and that's the second member of the M9. So I'm going to slowly but surely present all of them, these characters. They're quite interesting. But it's all, you know, on a certain level, it's all self-portraits. You know, like in a certain way. But, I mean, like here, in terms of, we were just talking about these figures. Okay, the biggest one in here, of course, is Larry Levan. I mean, I don't know how to make it any more explicit than that. Larry Levan is the greatest DJ of all time. But generally, there's a sort of consensus he's the greatest DJ of all time. And he was a master of the mixing things. So that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in mixing shit. I mean, like, I guess I blab anyway, so I can talk a little bit about this. Okay, so like up at Gladstone, my presentation is this singular, monolithic video. I think it's really good.
It's really good.
I think it's really good. But in a way, like for me, that's very, I wouldn't go so much to say it's Euro, but there's something very 20th century about it. It's something very retrograde about it in the sense that I'm interested in presentations that are a mix. They're mixed. I'm not interested in purity in a way. I'm interested in things that are mixed, different sizes, different shapes, different colors, different forms, different mediums. Like, not to overuse a slave ship analogy, but it's like I'm interested in the slave ship. I'm interested in, you get a bunch of individuals, you chain them together, and you turn them into this. They went in there as Africans, and they came out in the meat grinder as black. I'm really interested in that. How specific, discrete things get either imposed, consensually or non-consensually, get forged into this new thing, identity, group, gang, whatever you want to call it. I'm fascinated by the tension between, or as I like to use the term, Carrie's term, discrepancy. How discrepancy is so central to black being. Like, from the beginning, you know, you're in a slave ship, you're on a plantation, they're telling you you're not human, they're treating you like they're not human, like you're not human, they're raping you when they want, they kill you when they want. And everything around you, the entire structure around you would lead you to acquiesce to this idea that you're not human. But we knew we were human. So even in the face of that, so that means like discrepancy, the hard, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Tension of it was always there, central.
You say retrograde, but like to me, there's something about that sort of corresponds to the, I don't know, excessiveness or something of the array in here. And it asks to me the same question in a way, which is like, how much is too much? You know what I mean? There is a kind of...
Well, when it comes to black folks, I would say it's never enough. It's always never too much. You know, it's like, you know, like if you have like gay brothers and sisters, they come in and they say it's always too much. Well, I mean, we know so much of it. It's like the bigness of black queer folks, the bigness of like hip hop stars, which is, you know, all of that is compensatory. It's like we are creating space for ourselves. Muhammad Ali, you know, you don't need to be a shy, this kind of person, because the system is pressing you down anyway. You have to press up, you know. So, you know, that's kind of what that's about. Like, and to a certain degree, I'm interested in people who have negotiated those tensions with grace, elegance, style, all those kinds of things. That's why Miles, who I would call a hero, you know, it's like Allegra is not a hero either. It's a trickster. It's so complicated. He's a complicated figure, but he's fascinating to me because of how he did negotiate the constraints in the terms of what supposedly a black person, a black being was supposed to be able to do, think, feel. You know, and so in that sense, truly a model, you know, but not bigger than Larry Levan. Larry Levan is the biggest to me.
I'm still thinking about the Miles thing. I mean, you raised Miles, so I mean, I guess one of the questions for the show and for you also is, you know, how do we think about what is a kind of, you know, masculine heroism that is evident, you know, in the show. I don't know. I'm not going to start about the Miles thing, but.
Well, yes and no. I mean, for me, like, again, this is just me personally. Like the alpha male, whatever the other male is supposed to be thing, it just never worked for me. I never really felt like I fit in it. I found myself my whole life in contexts where everybody was jockeying to be the alpha male at the top. And I was just sort of thought the whole thing was really kind of bizarre or something to me. And it's not because I'm queer or anything like that. It's just, I just thought it was bizarre. But I'm very interested in masculinity. I'm very interested in power. But I'm also interested in how seldom what we would call a masculinist modality is just shot through with all this other stuff. Like Miles has got to be one of the most femme jazz guys ever. Even though he had all this pimp talk and all this kind of stuff, he was bisexual. I mean, it's just, you know what I mean? It's just, his sound is so soft. It's so not masculinist. Like if you can put, like if you just say the voice in jazz, instrumental voice in jazz, the saxophone is a pretty instrument. And that's like, in the beginning is Louis Armstrong, that's the trumpet, right? So that's like the epitome of it, but very quickly it becomes the saxophone. And so from Coleman Hawkins to, you know, straight through to John Coltrane, you just think it's super masculine. You know what I mean? It's just mastery, black mastery of the instrument or something like that. But then people like Lester Young, like I think of Billie Holiday and Lester Young, Miles as being their offspring. His sound is soft. He has a very, very soft sound. There's something about the dichotomy between his soft sound and his brash, aggressive personality, or something about his finesse, if you want to call it, his finesse and his blackness, his darkness, his unrepentant darkness. I mean, he's amazing to me. Like, okay, you got Larry Levan, he's gay. You got Miles, he's a bisexual. Tourmaline, Dawn, that character, I said, that's a female. You know, all of that. And, you know, even there, I'm posing with my little vagina trying to be down or whatever. But I'm just saying, to me, these ideas we have about the masculine, the feminine, I mean, I'm very much a product of when I was born. Like, I was born in the 60s, so I know probably irreparably on some deep structural level, sexist, you know what I mean? But it's something that I've always, I guess, been ambivalent about. I've been ambivalent about it because in the context of Mississippi, when I grew up, my uncles, my grandfathers and stuff, they just were like kind of crazy and out of control, you know? Basically, and I was always sort of, even as a kid, a little ambivalent about it, you know?
Well, I guess, I mean, yes, but also, you know, it's, one has to figure out how to, so it's like the brashness and the terrorizing of women is not, that's not something that you can balance out.
What do you mean? Go elaborate.
Well, I don't know. I'm not here to really talk about Miles Davis. I guess.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking about it in terms of Miles. No, go ahead.
Well, I continue to think about it in terms of Miles just because it's like I'm not sure that the south sound of the trumpet can actually, you know, alter our understanding of how one is behaving.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying, and I continue to think about it in terms of, like, we talked about this in terms of Future, and, like, I think of Future as, like, a great vocalist who fits into these categories.
You mean the rapper Future?
Yes.
For those who not the Future. We know black people are going to be in the future. We got it on billboards now. But but we need the rapper feature. Go ahead, sir. I'm just translating. Follow your discourse.
Everybody knows who Miles Davis is, but nobody knows who Future is.
Oh no, a lot of people, but a lot of people don't either. So go ahead. Anyway, I just
Raise your hands if you know.
Who knows who Future is? That's less than 50%. You raise 2 hands, that doesn't count. Yeah. Future's the shit.
Blues man.
He is a blues man, straight up.
Ebony smiling over. I want to talk about metal a little bit.
About what?
About metal, this
Metal?
material. Yeah, I want to talk about
Let's get
aluminum.
the music.
What can you tell us a little bit about just how you're making these choices? Because I wonder if they correlate or how do they representationally, like what do they have to do with all the things you're talking about today? I'm thinking about quantum appearance. I'm thinking about reflection. I'm thinking about gigantism. All these things, and I'm thinking about the ways in which the materials like shift. You know, like. Is it arbitrary? How are you making these decisions? Because, yeah, that's all I need to say.
That's pretty arbitrary. I mean, it's not arbitrary in the sense that it's not lived in. Like, I live in these decisions, but I think Ebony was saying we were talking, that she was talking to Nikita. Yeah, she said she was talking to Nikita, and she said to Nikita, you know, when AJ's organized these images, he's just doing, it's no playing, no nothing. And I was like, and she said, Nikita was like, really? You know, I didn't really even think people thought about sometimes I think people think about my themes, maybe, if they're interested. But I never really thought about anybody thinking about my process like another artist, you know. It's incredible how much of it is just intuitive. It's just, see, the problem with that is it suggests the way we typically think of it as it's not deep thinking. You know, it's like an intuition that's built on years and years and years of being in my own psyche about what I'm attracted to and what I'm not attracted to.
Yeah, what is beautiful is a big question.
That is the question.
Yeah.
That is the question. I mean, it's like really funny, like I'm still fucking with this taxi driver thing, much to the chagrin of my Karen. I'm still messing with the sound, but it's like, I was like this, in the back of my head, I was like, there's one thing I didn't have my pimp say in the ADR session, and I'm like, how did I do it? I just say it myself, and it's just death and beauty, death and beauty, death and beauty. It's a chant, like death and beauty, death and beauty, death and beauty. And so, that's my thing. I don't know.
You say, can you remember some of the things he says?
Well, yeah.
Can you remember some of the things he says? There's some incredible poetry.
Who?
The pimp. His name is Scar.
Oh, can I remember some of it? No, not really. I think that.
Stevie is a genius.
Yo, Stevie's a genius. Yeah, but Stevie is a genius. Everybody knows that. I mean, like the whole big thing with Scar, the pimp was like, it's, you know, some of it just so basic. It's like this. These motherfuckers think they know what's going on in their minds. They do not. They don't have a clue what's going on in their heads. And it's kind of like, you know, just, you know, it's funny, like the first conceit of the film was just, okay, I want to make these folks who were intended to be black in the movie like they were intended to be. And, you know, I'm sure people have seen it because I said it in the New York Times thing. It's like, you know, Travis Bickle was always dealing Ruth. He was always dealing Ruth. They confused it by making him go kill some white folks. But he was basically always dealing Ruth. But, like, for me, like, I'm very, like, I know, like, that some of my impulses are problematic. They're problematic impulses.
Like, what is a problematic impulse?
Oh, at the top of, one of the top of the lists would be, like, my obsession with Black Death. Would be.
Why is it a problematic impulse?
I mean, maybe it's not. I mean, I think it is. A lot of people think it's morbid, it's like whatever, but I just like to feel like I just have very little capacity for the elephant in the room or the Emperor's New Clothes. It's just like, if there's an elephant in the room,
Right.
I want to deal with the elephant, like, you know. And my most often repeated thing is I just don't do the uplifting, you know what I mean? Because there's so many people who can do that better than me. you know, yeah, I was gonna say some names, but I won't say no names. I'm not trying to get myself in trouble. But you know, but it's just like I have my own, like somebody said, it's like the coolest thing I've ever read that anybody's ever written about my work in a review. They said it was like a cross between a fanzine and a snuff film. And I was like, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I wanna, if I didn't do this show, I would be rushing out to see that show, you know? And I think that's all right. Huh?
Was Daniel Jackson?
Yeah, Danielle said that. So it's kind of like, you know, I'm cool with that. I'm 60-some years old now. I'm all right with it. I know, you know, I've been in therapy for a very, very long time. I got my meds, you know, regimen that I take religiously. I'm cool with it. You know, I'm cool. This is what I'm here for. I'm like, you know, like I say, my interest in black metal and stuff like that. I don't care for the music per se, but I'm very interested in the posture of it. You know, I tried to listen to it, but I just found it boring. But I like the iconography and everything like that. And even with that picture over there, I just keep joking saying it's like an image of my maternal bloodline and my fraternal bloodline. You know what I mean? So I'm just increasingly comfortable with, you know, like David Bowie said, run for the shadows. I'm just, you know, I'm attracted to the darkness. And this, I don't know. And maybe it's because we're consigned to it, you know, or something like that. But, yeah.
Is darkness the same thing? I think, should we be looking at time? Okay.
5 minutes?
If we want to take questions.
Oh, okay. So.
I'm really curious about the sort of question of abstraction too,
Right.
which maybe we can just talk about for a second. I think, like in Love My Life, the last few minutes, what we're looking at is a kind of white noise.
Yeah.
Can you say something about?
Well, abstraction is a kind of darkness. It is a kind of darkness. It's just like illegibility is a kind of darkness. It is a kind of counter, you know, these ideas of, it's a big European movement, enlightenment. Counter these ideas of enlightenment, you know what I mean? It's like, being in the light is no guarantee the clarity or anything, or
Well, see, that's why I don't
truthfulness.
see that film as retrograde.
Which one?
Should we call it Ben Gazzara or should we call it the other thing?
Oh, Ben Gazzara.
Yeah.
We should call it Ben Gazzara.
Okay. That's why I don't see it as retrograde. It seems to me to be.
I don't mean like the thing itself. I mean, it's kind of like if you make a great classical music. Let's say somebody was as talented as Beethoven, they made a great classical music album. It would be a great classical music album, but it still would be sort of retro. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter how great it was. It would be retro. It's kind of like, you know, the best steam ship when that nuclear sub's running around and stuff. It's kind of like, I mean, what makes things great is not just some sort of objective sense of quality or something like that. It's
method
something
or
about
process.
currency, you know, of the moment, being in the zeitgeist, being in a modality that meets people where they are, like things like that. Things like operating with a certain kind of lucidity or quantum lucidity about the now.
You know
Which is what I think the music does so often.
But I feel like the thing that is quantum about that film is that, you know the expression you slap the black off somebody?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I experienced it as. You know what I mean? That the black had been slapped off of somebody and put back on them somehow. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Which does,
I love that.
it was kind of a beautiful transference, right? Not simply painting over or replacing or whatever,
Right.
but like a kind of impossibility that like really couldn't have been accomplished either technically or out of anybody else's heart or mind, you know? So yeah, blackness is a substance. It's not only an idea.
I mean, there was this guy, one guy, he was one of the I don't normally do this read comments, but I've been so fascinated by, you know, something to Jerry, he posted online.
Yes, I saw it.
And there were all these comments, but people were just attributing all kinds of things to me that I never said. I never even said. It's like, you know, this one guy was like, did AJ even really look at Taxi Driver? I was just like, absurd.
No, I never saw
looked at it. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? But it's just, you know, and then when people say, like, I got my first, like, overtly negative review of my entire career. The guy said it was a nauseating exercise. And I was just torn between, you know, it would never have occurred to me to respond. Somebody was like, man, that's just going to be like stomping a bug or something. Don't respond, hold back. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not. So, you know, it's just...
Well, it's inevitably going to rattle somebody.
I mean, look, if it doesn't rattle anybody, you're just not doing shit. I'm sorry. It's got to rattle somebody. But the thing about it is, like, I just think, you know, to me, part of it is like me being committed to loving black people, but not letting black people dictate what I do. Both at the same time. Because I know, like, even a friend of mine is like, so this is supposed to be progressive. You made it so that the black people get killed. And I was like, you know, you can, if you want to see it like that, you can see it like that. But like for me, it's just about, I want this shit to be true. I want it to be its true face because it's a thing that had a profound impact on me as an artist, meaning the film. Mm-hmm. It had a really profound impact on me as an artist, like in ways that I'm not even comfortable talking about in certain ways, how it had an impact on me formally and all kinds of things, you know. So the whole idea of like, was it racist or not racist? I mean, that's like, was it sexist or not sexist? What the fuck isn't? Like, this is a white supremacist environment. Like, everything is racist. It just is. So that's not gonna be, it's like poor Dana Schultz. Like, she was like getting lynched, like, for making that little bitty painting of Till, and I'm just like for real? Like, there was black painters in the same show who had people getting killed too, and nobody said anything, not to defend her. But I'm just saying, if we're going to start destroying art because it's fucked up, its intentions are fucked up, it's a zillion things we have to get to before we get to Dana Schultz's painting. It's just really ridiculous to me, you know what I mean? I don't, you know, I'm like, whatever. That's just how I feel about it. I looked at it like, whatever. I mean, it's not like she dug up a photo of somebody's child that was murdered. His mom put that picture out. She did an image of it that I don't even know if it didn't have the title, you wouldn't even be able to identify it. And it does something that I'm kind of fascinated with, is the equivalency between brushstrokes and scars. That's something I'm personally very interested in. Like, I can talk for an hour about that. And how ex-slave Gordon, which I keep coming back to time and time again, like his whip marks on his back, it's like, if you come up if your cultural point of reference in Africa, let's say, is a society where people carve designs into their flesh, it complicates non-consensual scars. It just complicates it. It's not as, I'm not saying it's a good thing, I'm just saying, when I see Gordon, you know, my man Trynig is here, we've had our adventures around Gordon, which people never even saw. They were just all the craziness on the internet was like, oh, they want to put a whipped black man or whatever. I was like, what is the difference between that and Jesus' image? It's a torture image. A crucifixion is a torture image. What's the difference? Like, I don't understand the difference. And it's like, the thing about that image, there's several images of Gordon. That one is very, very special. It's not, look, Toni Morrison wouldn't have written Beloved without that image. It starts with that image. She puts it on a woman's back. And Toni Morrison, her book, The Black Book, which, if you want to talk about my practice, has had, that's the fantasy thing that Danielle is leaning to. The Black Book is the model for me in a lot of ways. I mean, because I read it, I saw it when I was very young, but that's the first place I ever saw the Gordon image. Was actually drawing from a newspaper of it. But the thing is, it's like, it's both a sign of objection. Like, what is the sign or the emblem of all the horrifying things that black people have had experienced? Is it an image with somebody's head cut off? Is it a lynching image? What is it? I think the Gordon is it precisely because he's unbroken, he's unbent. Like, the way he's sitting is so aristocratic. And at the same time, it's totally abject at the same time. That's to me, that's it. Like, we bear the marks of all this stuff, but we refuse to be broken. And I think that's why everybody's interested in black people, interested in black music. I said it 1,000 times, we're the canary in the mine shaft. Everybody knows what we have gone. That's what everybody's doing. Y'all are all behind us on this train to hell that we're all on. And we have demonstrated that we can survive. You can survive in the face of it. We keep proving it every time, like over and over again. We cannot be stopped. If we can't be stopped, y'all can't be stopped. So, whatever.
This is Arthur Jafa.
Albert, sorry about that.
Thank you both. We have some time for questions. If anybody would like to ask AJ or Simone something, I'll bring the mic on over. If you just raise your hand. I'm coming back to you 1 second. Where was that hand? There you go. Hello. Hi, AJ. Yes, hi.
Hello.
So there's a piece in the show, I think it's over here, that appears to be a self-portrait. And when I came to see the show, I stared at it for a long time, and it reminded me of what you guys just lightly touched upon in terms of your comments of identifying as like a griot or like an undertaker. So as I was looking at the piece, and excuse me if I'm projecting a little bit, but it kind of reminded me of capturing some sort of spirit on camera, and it reminded me exactly of like those comments you made. Can you talk a little bit about that piece and the role of being attracted to, I guess, the grotesque or the morbid, and how that plays a role in your work?
You mean this one right here?
Yeah, I think it's like on the wall over here.
The one that's leaning against
Yeah.
the wall? Yeah, like I said, I took that in the hotel room when we were shooting Daughters of the Dust. Like literally, both that one and the one, like I just had my, it was a Polaroid camera that we used to test exposure, and I was just messing around. And like in a way, it's not the first moment where I felt like I might be on the verge of something that mattered, like artistically, you know. It's maybe the second, because I had one little moment earlier than that. But it was the first time I felt like we were operating in a space of, it's gonna sound corny to say professionalism or something. Like, you know, it's like in the game. Yeah, like we were in the game. You know, like we were shooting 35 millimeter, and Julie, she knew what she was doing, and I mean, me, Julie, and Kerry James Marshall. That's a pretty tough pour, you know. So, and when we went down the first time, we was just like 4 of us. You know, 4 of us and 3 actors. That was the whole team. So, but I took that picture. It was a moment of play. Like it never, you know, like it's in some ways it's like one of the freakiest things in my art experience is going like when I was in Stockholm. You go and you see a big giant version of that image of yourself, and it's just really weird to me a little bit because it was so far beyond any kind of thinking about being in the art world. I was just like playing, like kids playing in the mirror. I was taking pictures. Like I said, it's the Batman version of me. It's like the Miles Davis version of me, dark, broody, scary, you know, don't say nothing to him or something like that. And that's kind of what it is, you know. I don't know about the spirit and all that kind of stuff. I just go where I go and I trust, you know what I mean? That what I'm learning, not just trust it, what I'm learning is things that I thought were kind of inconsequential or just personal things like other people, you know, it's surprising what people, like love is the message. All my friends would tell you, it's like, I want to put shit on YouTube. I mean, that was my ambitions for it. You know what I mean? And I never would have imagined the life it's had. And I remember the first time I talked to Gavin, I was like, I want to put the shit on YouTube. He was like, yeah, but hold up. Like, let's show it in the art world first. Because I remember he said something like, it's not as big as the world of YouTube, but people will have to contend with it in a completely different kind of way. And that has proven to be true. And, you know, I wouldn't have the life I have now or anything if it hadn't on the YouTube. I don't think. I doubt it.
Any other questions? The audience? Yeah, one moment, please.
Thank you so much. I was introduced by your work because my art is like rooted in Black existentialism. I didn't know you existed before that. And so like Black Death is something that I'm also very fascinated with, not like in wanting to watch it, but trying to understand it. And just like, I'm obsessed with Blackness, Black identity. I don't know what it means because for me, it's still not tangible. So I feel like, although I've been doing art since childhood, I'm not like as big as you, and so yeah, like I just see how much of an impact you're making on Black culture, and like all of my Black friends know about you, and they introduced me to you.
All of your Black friends?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not. No, for real, no shade. Keep going. I'm sorry.
No, I just because like in the communities that I'm in are predominantly white. And so Black culture is important to us.
Right.
And so preserving that. And my question is, did you ever encounter any resistance outside of Black spaces? And how did you make it into the mainstream?
I don't mean to laugh at the question, sister. It's more like, I think, sister, I shouldn't be so presumptuous, but I kind of get asked a version of this sometimes. Like this one sister in Berkeley asked me, "You seem to have chosen the art world over the film world to do your thing. Is you think the art world is a better fit for Black filmmakers?" And I just started laughing. I was like, "I didn't choose the art world. The art world chose me. You know, I don't like. If I could give you a map of how I got here, I would first tell you, don't take it. This is not the way to get here." It's like, it's worn my soul down. Like, to get here, like, in this fashion, that's like when you say you're resistance. Like, every day. And some of it, it's not even just external, it's internal. Like, I had to tell my son wants to be an artist, and I'm constantly telling him, this shit look easy to you? This shit is not easy. Like, at the taxi driver thing, my kids are 20 years apart, so my son is 19, my daughter is 39. And she said, "You know what I always said to you?" That's my son. I said, "What?" She said, he said, "Dad is so good at this socializing thing." And she said she just bursted out laughing. Because she's, she was born when I was like 23. She's known me for her entire life. He was like, "Dad is a fucking robot, man. It's Asperger's. It's some sociopath shit. Like pretending, I've learned how to be my mom always raised me to be cordial to everybody. My mom was always, aloha honey, or get you whatever. So my mom writes, I'm not making this shit up. Like, when we show love as a message, Gavin, did my mom give you a thank you card? She did. Gave him a thank you card. That's my mom. That's what my mom is. Okay. So I have a little of that. Be nice to everybody. But like, inside, I don't know what's behind. You know what I mean? Like what I'm feeling sometimes when I look at Love as a Message, the first time when I assembled it, because people say you edited it, I didn't edit it, I assembled it. I just strung it together, one thing after the other. 2 hours, I did it in 2 hours. And it was about 90% of where it is now. And nothing got moved around, I just added some things. I cried the first time I looked at it, and I never cried again. When I look at it, it's like I've said this before, it's like I'm a plumber looking to see if it's draining, if the drains are draining properly. I don't know why I'm built, like emotionally, I don't know. I think I'm a pretty emotional person, but I don't, it's like they say when if you get brain surgery, you don't operate on your own kids. You don't operate on your mom if you're giving her brain surgery. You want somebody who's a little on the spectrum. You know what I mean? Like a little who's clinical about it. They're not going to be like about to make a cut and thinking, oh, I can lose my daughter or my wife or my child. You want it to be a science project. And I think for whatever reason, there's this compartmental part inside of me where it's a little like a science project. Like I feel like to be born as a black person at this point in time and space, it is being born in a concentration camp. It's just a concentration camp. You can move around and dance, all kinds of stuff. It's some quantum shit. But we are in it. We are in it. 300, 400, 500 years from now, people will have the language to talk about it. The way you can say Auschwitz, Dachau, you can have names for it. They're going to have names for this moment, what it meant to be a person of African descent in this white supremacist bullshit. Like, they're going to have a name for it. We just can't name it now because we're in it. Outside of racism and white supremacy.
But the question of feeling is like, what is then the correlation between like power and emotion and feeling? Because for me, it's like you want something to have power, and often we don't talk about feelings in the art world apparently, but I have feelings. So do you? I mean, what is power then? Don't you want it to have emotional resonance? Like what feelings do you?
It's so uncanny. I don't know how to explain it. What I'm trying to say is like I think one of the things that. If I'll be so bold to say it, but I think one of the things that's unique about my work is like it is very affective. It's not out here trying to be cool, even though I'm trying to be cool. I'm trying my best to be cool. I'm like, I want to be very cool.
You're cool.
I want to be like, and I want, it's like, it's a kind of country, it's a, not a country, it's a, what's the word? It's paradoxical. Because I always want my stuff to be like the surface of this thing, like implacable. I want it to be just like, you can't touch me. You can't touch me. You cannot touch me. Or as like Prince said, I love it. I aspire to it in my head. He said, people who try to play me, play themselves. That's what I aspire to. I just want to be totally untouchable, right? And maybe just because I feel, but I feel like my feelings, I'm always attracted to the thing that some part of my organ says, that is going to be moving for whatever reason. That's a moving thing. Like, I don't know how many of y'all saw the video, right? Okay, so there's a moment in it where it's just James Brown holding on a pole saying, help me, and I just threw it in there. Like, it wasn't like I was consciously thinking about it. It was only when I walked in this space and I saw it projected big, and it was just him on this pole saying, help me. And I was like, that's it. It's no deeper than that. That is like it. And like, so the challenge is always, how do I make a thing that is as good as the shit I steal? Like Larry Levine. Tremaine was trying to.
How you guys doing?
So I heard
You talk a lot, and the talks, articles, but I never heard a thing about your dad switching out the painting and painting in black. My dad was that. When I was, one of the most powerful things I've ever seen happen to me in my life was my dad painted Santa Claus black with shoe polish. And it was almost like a whole comedy routine. But I knew he was doing something deeper than a comedy routine. And my mom was upset and laughing. I was laughing, and it's just,
when I think about this, do you think there's this lineage of, like you talk about trying to give up
the slave ship.
Because then,
I think about my dad painting Santa Claus, and I know a story of my grandfather sending my dad's brother to the
whites,
only entrance in Harlem, Georgia, to get breakfast.
Hold on, we couldn't hear you. You're breaking up. Hold on.
So there's just this lineage of doing things like that. Like, is it do you think it's subconscious? Because my dad wasn't making artwork, nor was your dad. But to me, that thing my dad did with the Santa Claus and what your dad did with the painting of the from Spain is just as important as The Rage or anything David Hammond has done for me. And again, and it goes to the person who asks about your work not being big as AJ's. I disagree. The work is big if it's big. It doesn't matter how much money you make off it and how it's received. And my dad painting the Santa Claus gives me the same feeling as that. And I imagine maybe that's the same as your dad taking that off the wall and not even talking about it, just painting it black.
Yeah. I mean, I can say one like quick thing about that. To me, what I feel like I'm trying to tap in, I have all these different things that I've said for years and years, like don't get caught up in what the shit looks like. Get caught up in what the shit is like. You know, let the look will take care of itself. Focus on what it is, what it's doing, what it's trying to do. But I know, like, there's something about a little gesture. It would seem like a little gesture. I don't even my dad will remember that he did it. It's something about, like, when you go to your grandmama's house and she has, like, the ashtray with Niagara Falls on it or something like that. It's like that relationship to a material artifact is a different relationship than we normally think of in the art world. It's like class. It's not upper class. It's a kind of, I think, common. It's like going in your great aunt's house and they got the plastic on the couches that they never take off, right? Everybody's seen that. I'm very interested in how those things can just be transposed to this context. And so it's not about being as big as I am or whatever that is. You know, it's about, like, those pictures. The only thing I've done now is put those pictures on a piece of metal. It's the same picture I took 30 years ago. That's kind of what I've learned. It's like, you know, one of my quips is like, no masterpieces, just conversation pieces. Everything should lend itself to a question. And I don't mean in a corny way, but it should just make you think about your own life, what you think is beautiful, what you don't think is beautiful, what you think is appropriate, what's not appropriate, all this kind of stuff, you know, because like I keep saying over and over, like I said it earlier, it's like I love black people, and I'm not trying to have black people tell me what to do. You know, I'm trying to be free. I'm literally trying my best to be free for myself first and foremost, but for my kids and just for the common good or something like that. It's just like Frank Ocean said, we all try. You know, we all try.
I think we'll do one more question if we have one. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Simone. One question. Arthur, you said something earlier that I wanted to touch on. You spoke about African aesthetics, Africa, and black music as integral, I wrote down integral, to contemporary art and how we see that. Could you expand on that and also maybe share how you think about that in the work that you're making today?
Well, I have, the only essay I've ever written, I don't know if you know of it, it's called My Black Death, again, my death obsession, but it does break it down as, you know, without going into a whole elaborate thing right now. But again, for me, it's just free. It's trying to be free. It's trying to do a thing and then seeing where that lands you. Like a lot, like say with the taxi driver with Ben Gazzara, I had that first impulse. Oh wow, I knew when I saw it in high school there was something off about it. I mean, I was attracted to it, repelled by it. I was like, I just thought it was the racism was what disturbed me about it. So years later when I read that, like, oh, those are supposed to be black folks when he goes in and shoots everybody in the end, because there's a moment in the diner, you know, where you have these two actual pimps, real pimps, not actors. You know they're not actors because they got this level of self-possession that actors just do not have. It's like they're sitting like this. And I remember distinctly in high school seeing it and just going like, huh, like that. Years later, I read that they was, you know, those are just two guys who were hanging out at the location they asked them to be in the film. And they sat. It's like one shot. You know, the way in the movie it's like De Niro's talking. It's when he says his big first, he vocalizes his philosophy. And they cut to them. It looks like, it's just an editing thing. It looks like he's sitting here talking and those guys are there and he's looking at them while he's talking. But the thing is, it's like, for me, okay, so the first impulse was just put the black people back in there. Even if they're going to get their brains blown out, put them back in there like it was initially intended. That's as far as I knew in my head. Once I did that, technically, when I sat down on the editing thing, that's when I was like, well, this, you know, the pimp, it's like he just needs space. It cannot be just in Travis Bickle's It can't be, his psyche can't be at the center of it. So it's a counter move, but that move was only possible once I stepped into the room. So much of when I talk about black aesthetics, the African aesthetics, I don't think, I've said this before, I've been to Africa, I'm not sure Africans are black. I don't, not in the way that I think it. I saw Larry for a second. I've had this conversation with my African friends who were born in Africa, who I love. You know what I mean? But I think we are mutants. We are African, but we are mutants. We are African, I'm not sure they are black. And what I mean by that is blackness to me, is defined by all these absences and stuff, all these gaps, all these insecurities. Everybody, not everybody, I know they're black socio-politically. I'm not saying they're not socio-politically black, but on an ontological level, I'm not sure they are black. And so part of the challenge is if you can take traditional African music, amazing, the oldest, most sophisticated musical instrument in the world, and you look at black music, meaning African music from the diaspora, by people of African descent in the diaspora, in the 20th century, when I grew up, you would never confuse the two. You couldn't, outside of Fela and maybe Hugh Masekela, South Africa has a certain continuity with black and white. You just would never confuse African music with black music. And even Fela doesn't sound like Fela sound if he didn't come here and hear James Brown, and it unleashed his thing. That's why Fela's thing is, to me, in the 20th century, Fela's music is the hardest music that came out of Africa, right? So, if that is the case, we all came from there, but our music just is 1,000 times over, doesn't sound anything like that. The fundamental question for me is, if there is much material expressivity in Africa as there is musical expressivity, what is the visual equivalent of this thing of the music which looks nothing like African music? What is the funky, badass, all the crazy fucked up shit that black music is? What is that in visual terms? I think we see it all the time. We see it. Basquiat definitely had it. He definitely had it. He definitely tapped into something. When I first saw his work and I showed it to my friends, very sophisticated, smart folks, they were like, it's some cooning thing. They were saying he was cooning because he was pretending like he could not draw. And on a certain level, he was. It was a rhetorical gesture to draw like a kid, like he couldn't draw. It was something he had to face down in his short life. He had to face it down. He created this monster, and then afterwards, everybody was questioning his sophistication. Look at any of the interviews with that brother. Any of them they are all amazing, because psychologically, you see him contending with the thing he had made, and we have no idea what he would have done if he had lived another 2 or 3, a 30-year-old Basquiat. We can't imagine what he would have done. 40, 50-year-old Basquiat, we cannot imagine what he was capable of. But he was destroyed by the context. He was destroyed by the context.
Okay.
And on that happy note,
on that segue,
let's go up for my words.
I actually think it's the perfect note, and to be honest, for many reasons that hopefully we will discuss it later. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, AJ, Simone. Really great to hear you two speak. Thank you for coming. This show is up through June 1st, so we hope to see you back. Have a great evening. Thanks, guys.